Hi everyone, welcome. It's Carly from Carly's Creative Clay. I see we already have people in the chat, so welcome Fordy and Charlie and Gina. Great to see you all here. I hope you're all having a good week. I, as usual, been down with the virus, but I'm back. I'm here. It's fine. Right. What I'm going to start with is showing some items from my shop, which is how I start every week. This week I'm going to show you just some of the little hangers that I've made. This isn't the whole range, there's at least twice this amount. But what you don't get to see so good in the photographs on my Etsy shop is the glitter that's on them. There's a lot of glitter on the background.
4D says he can't chat because he's covered in green. I assume he means clay.
Oh, you claying, 4D? What you making?
He said he can't chat.
I know you can't chat. Dang, you're going to have to tell me later once you're cleaned up. So yeah, lots of glitter on the background, and they've got a little bit of ribbon to hang up. They're £8 each, and something I really enjoyed making, especially the big butterflies, because these were made out of small bits of cane that I made specifically for these. So got no more of it, so once these are bought I would not be able to recreate this specifically. Same with all of these, there's not really doubles of any of them. There are some that are similar, so like the unicorn, I've got some with gold hair, and I've got one other black haired one on a blue background, but there's only one of each on the background that I'm showing, if that makes sense. Right, so I'll chuck these off to one side so we can get on with what you're actually here to see, which is another caning tutorial. This week, there we go, right, it's a slight progression on when I showed you how to make the canes that you had made, how to turn them into a sheet of clay to be able to then lay that over things as a veneer, or I used it to turn my little plain wooden table into a really pretty decorated one. Well, it's very easy to turn your canes into a flat sheet. What is harder is when you've got an uneven or curved surface, how to cover that if you don't want to make a sheet and lay it over. Now, the problem with making a sheet and laying it over the top of the thing you want to cover in the pattern can be placement, and I'll show you what I mean. What I did was I had a wooden hippo statue that I got from a charity shop, and it was alright. I liked the shape, but the wood was a bit scruffy. So I know what I've not done. I've not shared the picture of this marked up, so I'll explain what I did. I did have a photo of it. What I did was, you can see on the back leg, I covered it all in masking tape. Then I used a Sharpie to draw the sections that I wanted roughly, and I did that in different colours, and I drawed lines in the direction I want the canes to go, and then I got PVA glue and covered the whole thing in PVA. Now, the reason for the masking tape is it has a very rough surface when you look at it under a microscope, and when you feel it, it's slightly porous. It's not very slidey. Clay sticks to it a lot better than polished wood, and certainly things like glass and ceramic, you will find that you'll get a better bond if you cover in masking tape. Now, the PVA glue has two different reasonings for using it.
Says, he's so cute already.
I know, I'm really pleased with him. And this one's actually going in the shop. The first cane covered animal I made, I kept because it was a cat and I loved it. The PVA glue has two reasons for it. Firstly, it seals in the Sharpie that you've drawn out your lines with, so that it doesn't rub off onto the clay. And secondly, you'll find when you cover something in masking tape, when you come back to it the next day, the glue on the tape isn't very strong and it will all lift off and be peeled in a little pile at the foot of your thing. That's happened to me a few times. It is quite annoying. So you can get massive bottles of PVA glue really cheap. Just whack a coat on it and it all holds. Then you don't necessarily have to make all your canes before you start covering it, but I do advise it. I tend to make a few different versions of the same cane and save the ones that I'm not using for a future project, so I've got ones to come back to. And that's what I'm doing with the final cane, which is, this is a flower cane like this. This is what I'm going to do on the back legs. Can you focus that? Thank you. There we go. That's what I'm going to do in the space remaining. And I made this originally for my table. So don't throw away any end canes or smush them up, because you will find future uses for it. So, right. My big advice when you're putting your slices on is you want to start from one end and work to the other, rather than from the middle and out. It's just easier. The advantage to not making a big pattern sheet is that you haven't got to try and work out where everything's got to lay in the right place on a flat bit of work surface. It's far easier to get the design wrong, and when you lay it down it's wonky or bits are not in the right place. So cutting even slices and just slotting them in next to each other, working in a line across, means that you've got everything placed where you want. But you then have the problem of smoothing out, because if I hold this up closer, you can see there's lots of little gaps in between the canes, and you can see all the join lines. Now you can leave it like that. Some people like the tiled look, but I am going to show you how to smooth it all out.
Arty Life Live says hiya.
Hi Arty Hearty Life, it's nice to see you. I'm just going into why the pros of putting your canes onto your curved surface instead of making a flat sheet and then laying it over. And basically, long story short, is you get it all in the right place.
Fairy Hedgehog says, blooming advert. Sorry, I mean hi. Arty Life
Yes.
says, sorry, I can only stay for half an hour tonight as I have to pop out. And Charlie Star says hi.
That's cool. It's lovely to have you for any time. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a border breaking up all the sections. So the first thing, let's get you off your tile. First bit I'm going to do is put the edging in around that tiger print cane, because you're always going to work from one side to the other, and you're pushing in so that it lays in next to rather than on top of. And because I'm going to be smoothing all this in after, if you've got any rough joins, it doesn't really matter. It all tends to work out.
Fairy Hedgehog says, love the hippo. And Auntie Hearty Life says, it's a fabulous beast.
Thank you. I have no idea what I'm going to charge for it yet. I haven't actually sold a cane animal in my shop yet. So I'll work it out. But it will be up for sale once I've got him finished and baked up and varnished. And you don't have to varnish your clay. It is waterproof and fine without it, but it's quite a matte colour. So if you want shiny, your options are either varnish or polish it with sandpaper. My hands are no good at that level of work, so I tend to go down the varnishing route.
Charlie Star says, I'm colouring, so I'm going to be pretty quiet, but thank you for the video, Carly. I hope you're feeling a bit better now.
Still rough. I had a virus and I started to get better, and then I got ill again at the same time as other members of the household, so I think I got a whole new virus on top of the one that I had, which is just unfair. Your body should let you get rid of one and have at least a day's gap before it allows the next one in. I've got such a friendly immune system, it welcomes everyone.
Fairy Hedgehog says they need to cook dinner and get but they'll listen while they cook.
Cool. Right, so we now got the edging on, apart from around the tip of that towel, but we're going to fill in from the legs. So first off, we're going to do some slices of the cane that we're going to put on top of that blank space.
Says, oh no, not new gems.
I know, right? And it's coming into summertime. We shouldn't even, to me, having viruses is a winter thing, but apparently not. Right, with cane slicing, I advise you get over the top of your cane looking down rather than having it too far in front of you. It helps you get even slices. I saw Arty Hearty Life made a really brilliant recommendation on one of the clay groups. I think it was you that said lay your cane on a sheet of lined paper, then you can slice on the lines and get even slices that way, which is an awesome idea. Through practice, I've gotten pretty good at eyeballing it, and I find that so long as they're roughly the same thickness, you're gonna do okay. The other thing, I see people doing the thinnest slices. Don't start off that way. When you are new to caning, you want to have slices that are at least a few millimeters, maybe up to about 1/2 millimeter, because it's easier to actually handle and put them where you want. The only time that's not the case is when you're dealing with transparent and you want to see what's behind it. But I tend to... Sorry.
Charlie Star says, unfortunately, viruses don't care what temperature it is.
I know, right? Viruses are the worst. But, yeah, I tend to do a thicker slice with my cane work. Now, so I'm just going to go over and just quickly do some slices. If you start noticing your cane is distorting, then just roll it to one side like that, because you're pushing down on one side continuously, you can start to flatten it. So just by giving it a little bit of a turn means you're then cutting from a different side and it straightens back out. It is preferable to have a sharper tissue blade when you do this, especially if you're deciding you want to go for very thin slices. Knife sharpeners can be used on tissue blades, but I tend to use the back of a cup on the underside of mugs and cups there is a unglazed ring where it had to sit in the kiln. If you run your blade across that, it's the same as a sharpening stone. You will get metal residue, like a dark grey on it, but that comes off of a scourer. But this is how thick my slices are. See, they're not tiny thin. I know people who do probably half that, if not thinner. Okay, but this is far easier to handle. Now pick up your piece, start from closest to where you've been working, sorry, and you're just gonna tuck it against the line of the clay you've already added. So you're trying to match up the sides as much as possible, and just use your fingers to curve it round, or you can get a little ball tool to try and tuck it into the right shapes. It does help if your canes are quite new when you're doing a very...
You're still off the bottom.
Sorry, I'm still off the bottom. How's that?
Much better.
Right. Just tucking in around the back leg. It helps if your canes are relatively newly made, so you can flex the slices a lot more without cracking them. But this flower one, I made this several weeks ago.
Larry Hedgehog asks, Carly, how do you decide what patterns to use for your canes? And the colours, do you plan it or wing it?
What I do, if I've got a big item that I'm not doing all the same one standard cane, I first start out by dividing up the thing I'm covering into lines that I think look pleasing.
Charlie Star says, can you do a zoom on all the different canes?
Right, zoom in on all the different canes. Right, we have triangles with grey triangles inside. Then I went to a brown background triangle with black and grey to bring the colour in of the black and white. Then we went to a tiger print with gold and copper and black and white in that. Then I did a hippo cane, because a hippo needs a hippo cane in my world. Then lastly we've got that flower going around the back leg and tail. The dividers are...
Larry Hedgehog says, good idea to Charlie about zooming.
Brilliant idea,
Charlie
thank
says,
you.
Ooh, I love these grey triangles. And Larry Hedgehog says, love the hippo cane. Flower is so pretty too. Charlie Star says, hippo cane is adorable.
Thank you. The dividers is I got some gold clay, mixed in a pinch of black clay, and did a stick of both, and then another pinch of black to make a darker gold, and then just twisted them together. So that's what the edging is. The only other thing that is present is black on the eyeball, and I put a bit of brown swirly clay for the ears just to pick them out. Now I start out by dividing up the item visually in lines that I think suit it. Then that tells me how many different canes I'm going to need. Then I pick a colour, a main colour, possibly two. For this I went for the grey that hippos normally are, and they tend to have a browny pink to them. So I went for the brown and went for a red to bring your eyes to that kind of idea. Then after that, you start to look at the themes that you want. So I started for this, I went through African tribal print designs on Google imagery to give me some ideas, and saw that they really liked a triangle. Most of the tribal designs are based around geometric triangles. So I thought, African animal, let's get some triangles on it. So that's where this all came from. But sometimes I'm basing it around a flower or a kaleidoscope design. It depends on what my mind is wanting for the theme. I do find though often what I planned in my head for the cane isn't what it ends up like. So it's nearly there, but not perfect. And often I really like what I have ended up with anyway. So that's how I end up deciding on what I do. It's a bit more fluid, so it's hard to give a full proper way that you can do it other than just think through the process. Don't do that. There we go. Patch that back in. Gotta watch raw clay sticks to your board. Right, so now I'm down the bottom again. Let's come up here and not squash canes into the back of it. Being aware of your workspace is so important, because it's really easy to lean your project on a bit of clay that you didn't want to, and then you're stripping clay off with a blade or with rubbing alcohol. So can you see I'm just going along the edge, and I am tucking the slices in sideways to meet the edge of the clay that I've already got, rather than going from the top and pushing down, because you're more likely, if you do that, to catch an edge and fold it up. So you want to go down and then sideways. Your last few bits you might not have any choice but to put them in from above, but it's risky. Because this is a round one, there's going to be some gaps, and you can either get some...
Fair Hedgehog just asked, does it matter there are gaps?
I'm just getting there. Right. Get some filler clay. So any clay that's a complementary colour. Now, you can either at the end go around and just push them in the gaps, but you've got to make sure you take a very small bit, roll it into a very thin stick, push it in like that, and when you roll it out, that won't be noticeable anymore. So like that. Or you can make up little triangles and push it in before you add the next cane slice. So do a line and then push them in. I tend to go for this method, but I wanted to do a line without, to show that if you forget, you can still fill in the little edges. Or if you just square off your round, you can do that. Let's get a slice to show you. So if you decide it's easier to work in squares, just push on the edge, and there you go, it's now a square cane. See? Not focused, but there we go. So you can square up a round cane if you want, or you can get little triangles and push them in. Either way works fine. Or just be willing to have distortion around the very edges of it when you roll it out, because it will push into the gaps, but it will distort the image if you don't. Go around and just do little fillers like this. But I'll fill those bits in later, because it's going to be really boring you watching me do that. Actually, yeah, fill that bit in first. But from now on I am going to go around and just push in tiny little dots. Now I know people who say it's important to make sure that the dots are triangular shape and you measured them and all this sort of stuff. I've never found that to be the case. Just if you push in dots and you don't go top to bottom, because that's the other thing, if you've done that you can squidge some of the edging clay into the picture, but it's not so critical because we want in the top side, not the bottom. So you just pinch off little dots and just push them in place, and the next slice will make it the right shape. See? And if you decide that you've not put enough clay on one of the filler gaps, you can always pinch in another bit, because when you smooth it out, all the scruffy join lines will vanish. Right, you can see why I did the majority of the hippo off of live stream, because we would be here for ages. Oops, that's the square one, I'm not using that. There we go, like that. Bit more filler brown. So yeah, it looks very, very boring having to add so many slices to one thing, but you get into a rhythm of it and it becomes very relaxing. And especially when I don't feel well, I really enjoy doing cane work, because it's not something you've got to think too much about. You can just spend hours adding little bits and it all works out perfectly. I do sometimes worry about making sure that they're all facing the right direction, like I did with the triangles and with the hippos. On a round ones you don't even have to, I mean, if you really want to, you can spend a lot of time doing that, but I don't. Right, this is what I was hoping to happen soon. Can you see we're about to come up to a patch where, because of the curve, you can't fit a full slice in that gap, so you have got to do a bigger bit, and if it's for a round cane, just use your finger to push it into a rounder shape so that your slice will fit in there, and you can always top it up. I find that people don't notice when it's not perfectly uniform. It's part of the whole handmade charm thing. Having said that, I know some cane artists that manage to make covered pieces where absolutely everything is in perfect alignment. The filler dots are uniform. There is not a single bit of distortion on any of the imagery from smoothing out. There's not a single join line. I think they might actually have magical powers, because it's not something I've achieved. Maybe I will in a couple of years' time, who knows, but at the moment...
4D says, right, green clay softened. I'm no longer green like the Hulk mold. This cheap clay I bought when I first found the clay world is really rubbish.
Yeah, not all polymer clay is equal. And the thing about especially unbranded clay, there's nothing saying that they've not put in who knows what mixers. So it can be really varied what you end up with. And it's cheaper for a reason, that it has got all sorts of stuff in it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to have it foul in the oven and fall apart, although there have been reports of it. But with the branded ones, you're on a safer bet. But having said that, different brands of clay are right for different people, and they have different textures to them and slightly different capabilities. I'm a Fimo girl. I like the fact that it's not very sticky, and I like the way that it works. There are people who hate Fimo, love Sculpey. I can understand it. It's easier and cheaper to get if you're in America than if you're in the UK. There's a really good, cheap Fimo seller. And the thing about my supplier is he's about the same price as what you would pay for unbranded polymer clay. And why would you want to buy unbranded? Well, I can understand. It's hard to find one seller, especially since this seller specialises in doll's house furniture and not polymer clay. But as far as I'm aware, he's still the cheapest in the UK. So if you're looking for Fimo, go and search down Tumdee Doll's House. That's Tumdee.
What he said, I know, hence I'm trying to use the top. I use it for building under the top cover now. I just wouldn't use it and not throw it away. So I sit here with baby oil and clay. Sounds more exciting though.
Yeah. I've been working with a lot of yellow at the moment, and I look like a cross between a jaundiced person who ate a whole load of Wotsits. But I did end up making 2 very cute statues. So they are up this way. There we go. It's a range for gay pride.
Ford D said it is about the last thing he said, and Fair Hedgehog sent a smiley about the lions.
Yeah, they are cute. I'll be going more into that next week. But I am starting up doing a gay pride range of little statues. Yeah, so it's been an interesting week. I got someone to look over my Etsy shop, a woman called Virtual Bird, that's her website. Her actual name is Anna. Really, really awesome business advice. And she was so nice. Really was. Wasn't expensive. And she didn't find nearly as many faults as I thought she would. She was saying my photography ain't right. I got overexposure and need to work on my backdrop. So
Fairy Hedgehog says, didn't you say that all your previous LGBT stuff had sold?
yes, I did. Well, not all of it. I had a couple of gay penguins. They've all sold. I've got some large rainbow flag vases which haven't yet, and a trinket box with a flower made out of the colours of gay flag that hasn't yet, but the little models all have, and that's why I'm making more little models, because I do like that range. They're going to be £10 each. They're the 2 male lion ones. I'm going to do some female lion ones. I was thinking how with the male lions it's easy to distinguish that they're a pair of boys because they both got manes. But with animals like squirrels and foxes and penguins, I'm going to put bow ties and long ties and possibly scarves to depict that they're both male. And the females, I was going to do a little flower up by the ear, so like where their hair would be, and handbags. But if any of you can think of any other sort of accessories I could use to vary it a bit, other than ties and handbags and hair flowers.
You said they just sent you a picture of their clay work while watching you play.
I can't look on my phone right now. It's somewhere under the desk. But I will look as soon as I finish streaming for you, I promise. Now again, that needed extra space filling, so I made a little bit of a rectangle rather than a triangle to fill that space. And again, round this side up there, can you see it's got a thin line of white? I don't want to put that much brown in, so I'm just going to use my finger just to gently spread that slice out and spread this slice up, just to take out some of that space to make it a little bit bigger. So do remember, your clay is flexible and you can change the slices to fit the space that you have. Right, I'm going to try and speed up a bit. I don't want to spend too much more time on this, putting slices in and boring you all, before I get on to smoothing down. But I might not finish this back end completely on stream, unless you want me to carry on this for a bit longer. It depends on how interesting you're finding this. There we go. Right. Now, that is a large space, but I'll just fill it up with brown. So you might want to make sure that if you've got a lot of uneven spaces like around a leg, that the background colour you use doesn't stand out too greatly from the colour in the cane slices, because you might have some patches like this which are more background than cane. But I find I've never had anyone pull me up on that. Right, the other thing is, can you see the brown added in there? It's all in little bits. Don't worry if you've got to do that, it will smooth out straight. You can just add bits until you get where you want to with filling up the space. I'm just going to do a few more slices, then I'm going to start smoothing out the top end to show you how to do that. Whoop. But you can see how I'm just building up around the space. And if you're lucky, you'll find the last few slices are on an area that's easy to get to. Try and engineer it, because it is harder putting in the last few slices. So instead of coming up to the tip of the towel there, I'm probably going to try and make my last few slices be that leg. So I'm going to work across there and fill up that bit and then round like that. Okay, so try and be kind to yourself and not give yourself the most awkward place in the universe to finish on. Another bit of pro advice there. I have done it. I speak from experience. You can still make it look good, but you are just causing yourself.
Live says, sorry, got to run now. Bye.
Bye. Have a good week. Whoop, just tuck this one in. There we go. Right. Shall I show you guys smoothing out now, or do you want me to carry on filling up the other leg?
It's up to you.
Votes, please.
I think you have trouble because Charlie is colouring.
I might.
Is,
what time are we?
Kneading clay.
5:40. Let's do some smoothing out. But you can get the idea on how to fill up the space, yeah? Right. Now, smooth out, you need two things. Here we are, that's what I'm looking for. First, you need some deli wrap. That's what the Americans know it. I'm a UK person. What I get is Easy Leave Roll from Lakeland. So, the box is
You've had 2 votes for smoothing.
a light grey. This is about £5 for 300 sheets. Now what it is, it's like cling film, but thicker sheets. You know, like what you get between burgers when you get a pack of fresh burgers. It's that sort of stuff. You can use cling film, but I find you're much more likely to get little ridges in it or it to tear. It's far easier with something stronger. The other thing you can do is, you know, the single-use plastic bags you get in the veg compartment of your supermarket. Those bags, cut them open, they work just as well. Sorry, I got a sore throat. I've got to do some, keep sipping. The other thing you're going to need is something flat and smooth, hopefully with a curved edge. Now, I use my pot of tumble stones. I've got lots of them in different sizes. Just as a side note, this is glitter stone. It's so awesome. It literally is glitter in an actual stone. Because you're going to need to burnish over the top of it. I've seen people use the backs of teaspoons. You know, you can get those metal bars of soap to get onion and garlic smell off your hands. They work brilliantly. Or a marble, that would work. But anything quite smooth and small. The reason why you're putting the plastic wrap over the top is if you just start to rub and roll over this without anything covering it, firstly, the stickiness of the clay is liable to stick to what you're rubbing and smudge it all. And it can lift off and it just gets in a right mess. So putting over some coverage just helps you be able to do a really decent burnish without distorting everything. So let's get it central. Now, take some time to try and get out some of these ridges in that paper, because they will come through to your clay. Plastic, I mean. But you can smooth out ridges at the very end, and I'll show you that. But you are saving yourself some work by trying to get rid of them as much as possible in the beginning. So that's pretty good. That looks pretty well covered. Make sure it's nicely stuck down to your clay piece everywhere that you want, because you don't want to find there's an air bubble that going over it pops it and then that tears the plastic. Once you're happy that it's all stuck down to your raw clay, then you get your stone. Let's find one with a smooth edge. I like this one because it's got a dip to it, and that's good for rounded sides. But I've got a few quite flat ones. That one's also quite good. So what I find...
Woody says, "Ooh, thanks Carly, that's a great answer to my question of how I stop swearing at cling film when doing this."
Yes, go to Lakeland. They even do it online. You can get mail order. You're doing little circles over your clay so that you're not just pushing it all in one direction and getting a distortion, but you are smoothing it in together. And again, you can, to get it fully smooth, you can be at this for hours. So I do understand why some clayers go for the tiled look and not smooth it in perfectly. Can you see these little circles? That's what you're aiming for. And already you can see some of the join lines are going. Because this plastic wrap is not cloudy, it's very easy to see through where you've still got lines. The other tool that is really good for burnishing is your hands. You can just do it with your fingers. I mean, you don't have such a wider space, so you're going to be at it for longer, but you can feel what you're doing far easier by using your hands than you can by using anything to burnish in. So when I started, before I got some tumble stones, that's all I used, and even now my last go over will be with my, just use my thumb. But you do get a bigger space, so it does take up less time if you do get a tumbled stone, and they're not that dear. My problem is I've got to make sure I don't use the really good ones in a clay piece, because I really like putting stones in my work because I think they're beautiful. You can make quite good fake stones with polymer clay, but I really like using the real thing. So yeah, I've got to keep remembering, don't use this one even though it's stunning, because it's got a brilliant surface for burnishing with. And I'm just going round now. I've been at that for what, a minute or two. Make sure that you're gentle lifting the feet up. Look how smooth that is now already. There's a few join lines there, but you can see up by the top of that hippo bit there, it's all completely smoothed out, and they haven't distorted properly. And you wouldn't have had it that tidy if you didn't use the wrap. And what you can do, it's okay to lift up and put it onto the next bit, but what I suggest, if you're going to reuse the bit of wrap, which I do all the time, lay it flat on your table, get some tissue, give it a wipe. Yeah, I've forgotten this, and can you see, can you see in the light all that dark clay that has come off on the tissue? Let's come down here. It's a problem with lighting, it's hard to show some things up. Right, yeah, a lot of brown on that tissue. That would have gone over onto your clay, onto your new bit, and marked it. So it's always worth, give it a wipe down before you move it over. Now, I'm going to show you the last stage on the bit that I've got smooth already. So once you've got the paper off, I don't know if you can see, there is some little crease lines.
Oops, sorry, that's the wrong slider.
Sorry, slider's not going well. Can you see under the light there's some little crease lines from the plastic wrap not being perfectly smooth? What I do, I make sure my hands are clean as possible, because you don't want to do too much smudging. Just lightly go over with your thumb and just take those little crease lines out, and they will go, and you won't smudge up your work. You're not pushing on really hard. Other option you can do is get some rubbing alcohol, or that's 70% or higher, or isopropanol. I can never say that. Isopropanol. Yeah. Which is the UK's version of it, but it's normally
it's just
around it's the 100% version. It's called that. Bit on your tissue, and just go over with that, and that'll take the crease lines out and any smudging. If you've not got rubbing alcohol and you've got something that looks really smudgy, the last option you can do to try and save it is use your curved blade and take off a very thin layer, because it's usually the top layer that's smudged. So don't try it with your solid blade. You want your flexible one. Just, you want to curve it so that not in the direction of the clay, away from the clay, and you're just using a tiny middle bit of the blade, and you're going to just run it over the surface and just lift up. Can you see? Very, 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 very thin slice. Can you focus? Sorry. Right. Tiny bit. Very, very thin slice. It's hard to focus, it's so small. That would have been perfect for the microscope that Evil Spaz Monkey sent me, but it conflicts with the main camera, and we couldn't use it.
Well, I couldn't set it up in time.
But yeah, so you can take off some very, very, very thin slices.
I'd be scared to do that in case I cut off too much. But I think the answer to that one is use rubbing alcohol if possible.
Use rubbing alcohol if possible, but you will find that you can take off some very fine slices with a sharp, flexible blade. And getting used to doing that is a very useful technique, because you will find doing that actually gives you the most crisp finished image. Oop, just make sure you don't get it stuck to your hands and then touch the thing again, because you just smudge a load of clay on it. I do find that I do like to go over like this at the end, because anything that looks distorted you will find under the surface by just taking off 0.5 millimeter, you're then back to a very crisp image. Yeah, 1/4 millimeter, very, very thin. And again, if you're feeling unwell, if you're feeling painful, this is one of those tasks that you can lose yourself in for a while and not notice what your body's feeling like. So go around the charity shops, have a look for the things like made of ceramic or wood or metal, where you kind of like the shape of it, but if you don't like the colour scheme, or it's chipped and cracked, some of the ones that you can use can have quite a bad crack in it. So long as it's a stable break, you can coat it in clay. And I really do reserve cane work for when I'm feeling awful. Yep, wood would be fine. glass, anything that can go through an oven at the temperature your clay bakes. That's 110 degrees for Fimo and 130 for Sculpey, and who the hell knows for the generic unbranded ones. They somewhere in between the two. Yeah. But yeah, out of all the things I do, I find I reserve my cane work for when I feel at my worst, because I find that it takes the least amount of mental energy, and it sucks you in, and you can lose hours. So yeah, you can see now we've got a patch that's very smooth, and it's not distorted because I've shaved off any of the bits that were distorted. Sorry about that, it's a plague house. I'm wondering if I've got enough red clay to make a big cross for the front door. So anyone knows, plague house at the moment.
Is that making the canes or attaching them?
Right, making the canes takes more physical work and more mental work. It's attaching them to things. So when I have days that I feel slightly better, I make canes and I store them in cupcake boxes. Can you see? Now, every plastic thing that I use, before I put any of my hard work in it, I get a bit of clay.
Antle says good morning from YouTube.
Hello. You got to test your plastic. So I've tested both the white plastic on this and the see-through plastic. And what you've got to do for a test, get yourself some of your clay, push it on, and you smear it on so it's really well stuck. Try and make sure it's not stuck to your hands, but get it really well stuck onto your plastic. Like that. Leave that for 24 hours, 48 hours to be sure. If at the end of leaving it, you can peel that back, it might be a bit dry and crumbly because it's been left out. If it's not doing big gloops of sticky plastic, it looks like you've poured glue on it and then tried to peel off tacky glue. Certain plastics, polymer clays, melt, and I don't use any plastic that has reacted. It turns it funny. That's the only time I throw polymer clay away, is when it's reacted with plastic and gone all sticky like that. Better to have a bit like that and know about it than put all your hard work in something plastic and then find that it's all melted to it and it's all got to be bent. But yeah, cupcake boxes. All my old canes, or when I make canes, I end up doing little sideline diverts. So I ended up with a load of extra triangles. So I then put them together and made like a mix of triangles.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. And I've done a couple of those, and I put them all to one side, and when I come back at a later point with a feeling rubbish, want to cover something in canes, I've got a couple of boxes like this, and once I've covered one layer, I put some greaseproof paper on, and then I stack them up in layers inside the box. And I've got a few boxes like this. You can always, with older slices, if they've dried out, you can always revive them. It's easier to revive them once you cut them into slices than it is to try and revive slices, a dry cane that's still in its cane form. I'll show you what I mean. Let's move some of this out of the way. I know this is a complete sideline, but while we're at it, out the way, Hippo. Right, now let's get one out of here that is literally years old, which will be my turtle. Down at the bottom, can you hear? It's got very little bend. It is quite crumbly. Now, you can, to warm it up, reduce it like you would a normal cane by rolling it and bringing it back again. You can run a hairdryer over it. That helps a bit. But my personal preference for trying to make it so that these slices aren't so hard is, sorry, this cane isn't so hard, is you cut your thick slice, you cut it a little thicker than you wanted to, and then I just clean hands, because you don't want your fingers too sticky. I use the heat of my hands and I slightly pinch it, and I find just that movement, and if it gets too big, you just hold the middle and use your fingers just to press it back small again, and just bring it out a little and press it back small, and that now is a nice flexible slice that you can use on things. Whereas if I didn't do that, if I try and bend this, it just wants to break because the plasticizer's leached out a bit and it's dry and crumbly. But yeah, just give it a work, be gentle with it. If it does start to crack, put it down before it breaks, push it together and push down on it with your finger. So push it back together, push down on your counter, then use your blade to release it once it's stuck back together again. And look, it's tidy. So that had a crack just along there a minute ago. And then go back, warming it again with your fingers, pushing it back to the size that you want. I know it's a lot of work for a slice, so it depends on how valuable your cane is. But I really like this little turtle. Can you see? My little green turtle. So, but that now is usable, and I swear to you this cane is 3 years old and is pretty solid. So don't throw away your old ones thinking they've gone too dry. I'm not sure if this is the same instructions for Sculpey when it goes dry and crumbly. I don't use Sculpey that much. I really don't. But Thymo, you can generally pull things back from pretty dry. I hope all this was helpful. I've heard a lot of people say that they weren't sure about what to do to make a smooth sheet in that manner. So I do hope that you guys can now start finding all the models in the charity shops that are going to end up in the bin somewhere and get them covered up and looking beautiful. I probably shot myself in the foot because I know at least most of you actually are friends with me that live locally. So if you all start emptying out the charity shops of all the beautiful statues, I'm going to pull a frowny face. I'll have to get in a car and travel. Anyhow, I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all next week. I will put online a picture of this once I've finished faffing with it all.
Fordy says all of it's helpful, that's why I pop over each week when I can.
Yay, thank you, Fordy. And I love to see what you ended up making. I'll go onto my phone once I sign out from you all. Okay, have a great week everyone, and I'll speak to you next week.